Hi, everyone, and welcome to our week on understanding regression analysis. So for today, we're just going to give you the general idea of a regression as well as an example of one from your reading for the day. So the basics of a regression is that ultimately we live in a multivariate world. So we have a sweater here, just like I have a sweater on today, and maybe it's now the month of December. Maybe you also have something sort of cozy on, right? Why did you choose that specific sweater or hoodie, right? And it's oftentimes not just a single reason, okay? You didn't just choose that sweater because it was cold outside. You chose that sweater maybe because it was clean. Maybe because, in this case, this is a Christmas sweater since we're in the month of December, right? I chose it because it was clean, warm, festive, and also maybe it's soft. And in any case, though, it's because there's not one single cause of a dependent variable, right? There wasn't only one reason that I chose this sweater. There were a lot of reasons that drove me to choosing this specific sweater for today. And this is true of a variety of political phenomenon in the world, right? So if I were to give you an example from political science outside of sweaters, I might ask, why are some countries more economically developed than others? And in this case, our dependent variable is maybe income levels across countries. Perhaps you could even do GDP per capita. And there are a variety of reasons that you can have different income levels across countries or different levels of GDP per capita. For instance, you can see whether a country is a colonizer or not, right? Or whether they were colonized. You can think about the level of natural resources that they have. You can think about their access to trade routes, particularly if they're on like oceans or waterways. That tends to have slightly higher economic outcomes. You can think about the level of education. You can also think about whether a country is a democracy or not, right? Countries that are democracies tend to have higher economic outcomes, better economic outcomes than countries that are authoritarian in some respects. So in any case, though, like I've just listed off like 5 potential reasons for income to vary across countries, right? And when you think of it that way, right, if there are multiple causes, then how are you controlling for those multiple causes, right? And that's where regression comes in. So a regression allows us to sort of mathematically calculate the effect of every independent variable we choose to include in our model. So it would in our example from income in countries, it would look at whether the country is a democracy or not, access to natural resources, access to water and trade routes, whether they were a former colony of, or whether they were the colonizer. And this regression is going to tell us whether a given independent variable has an effect on our dependent variable when we've taken into account all other possible causes. If our independent variable has an effect on our dependent variable after we've controlled for all of the other possible causes, we can conclude that X causes Y. Remember when we talk about those 4 causal hurdles? Regression allows us to clear those hurdles because we're controlling for all of the other possible explanations. That being said, if you're excluding some possible explanations, your regression might go awry. Okay, but in any case, if you're controlling for all other reasonable explanations for variation in that dependent variable, then we can say that X causes Y, right? So if we're controlling for whether the sweater is clean and whether it's soft and whether it's cold outside and whether it's a holiday or not, right? If we're controlling for all of those things, then we can say that X causes Y. Now, from our example for today, from our reading for this week, we looked at the effect of having daughters on legislators' liberalism in how they vote. So if you recall from the from the reading, they look at NOW, which is the National Organization of Women, and then they also have the AAUW, the American Association of University Workers, I believe. And in any case, though, this is just NOW, and NOW is using a measure about how liberal a legislator votes on a scale from 0 to 100. Okay, that is the dependent variable. So I think they look at about 20 very specific pieces of legislation that legislators could vote on in the 105th Congress. That's what that 105th means here. And if the legislator voted yes on every single one of them, congruently with how NOW wanted them to vote, then they got 5 points for each vote, so 100 total points, but it could go as low as 0. Now, what you want to do with regressions, especially regression tables, you want to see what variables are significant, okay? So if our dependent variable is how liberal a legislator votes in the 105th Congress, and these are all of our independent variables on the left. So the number of female children or daughters, the characteristics of the legislator themselves, whether they are a woman, white, Republican, their age squared, how long they've been in office for, so service length and service length squared, their religion, so if they're no religion, if they're Catholic, if they are another kind of Christian, if they're another religion, and finally, the Democratic vote share of the district. And so the first thing you want to do when you have a regression table is you want to highlight all the variables that have stars next to them. If they have stars, this means the variable is significant, or it likely has an effect on the dependent variable. So here we can see that the number of female children has stars next to it, as does the variable female. So that one has stars next to it. Republican is also significant, as is Catholic, other religion, and Democratic vote share. The ones that are insignificant are race, so whether they're white, age, service length, and religion. Okay, so step 1 is highlight which variables are significant. Highlight the ones with stars. Those are the ones that you will likely discuss or you want to pay attention to when you're reading. Now, if we go on to our next step, we want to look at the coefficients. And there are a lot of coefficients here. Don't pay attention to the number in parentheses below, okay? That is called the standard error, and you don't want to interpret it, okay? You just want to look at the number on top, the number not in parentheses. This is the coefficient, okay? So I've put in boxes all of the coefficients, so green or red. Now, if the variable is significant, they are in green boxes, okay? If the variables are insignificant, they are in red boxes, okay? So if they are in red boxes, that means there are no stars. It is an insignificant relationship. This means the coefficient is functionally 0, and that variable has no effect on the dependent variable, okay? So this independent variable has no effect on the dependent variable. So here I would say that white, age squared, service length squared, no religion, and other Christian, all of those are insignificant and they have no effect on our dependent variable, which is legislator liberalism. Now here, as an example, this one is green. Okay, so we only want to interpret the boxes that are green. So this number of female children, for instance, the coefficient is 2.3. That is a positive relationship. This means that for every daughter a legislator has, their NOW score increases 2.3 points, meaning they vote more liberally. So if they had 4 daughters, if the legislator had 4 daughters, they would be likely to increase their liberal score by about 10 percentage points, since that's 2.3 times 4, okay? Or take this Republican coefficient. That's negative 44.9, right? This is negative. And so this is showing if the legislator was Republican, that their score is lower by about 45 points, meaning that they vote more conservatively. We can also do the same for female. So if the legislator was a woman, they had a liberal now score that was about 11 points higher than a man. If a legislator was Catholic, their liberalism score from now was about 4 points lower, this negative 3.97 here, than legislators who were not Catholic. Additionally, we see that if they identified as belonging to another religion, their liberalism score increased by about 11 points. Okay, and so it has a positive relationship. And then finally, in states where there was a Democratic vote share in the district, or really I should say in districts where there was a greater Democratic vote share, we also see a positive relationship. You see how this is a positive number? So you want to pay attention here to the direction of this relationship. Is it a positive number, as is the case for number of female children, or is it a negative number like we saw for Republican here, negative 44.9, or Catholic, negative 3.97, where it decreased the score, okay? Now, regressions are really great because it allows researchers to examine a large quantity of cases. So a regression and the results from it likely apply more broadly, okay? And it really allows researchers to mathematically tease out the effects of multiple independent variables at the same time, okay? But really, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to help us better clear our fourth causal hurdle of causality, okay? In any case, but you have to include all of the relevant independent variables that you think are going to affect your outcome, that dependent variable. The weaknesses, though, as I just mentioned, you have to quantify and control for all possible causes of your dependent variable. If you are not, you are going to have a problem called omitted variable bias. Okay, you're going to have a problem called omitted variable bias because our mathematical calculations are only accurate if we include all possible causes of the dependent variable. Okay, this means that if you leave a relevant independent variable out, your results are probably wrong. And that's a pretty big deal. Okay, if you put a lot of effort into looking for control variables, for possible confounders, and you don't find anything, that could be potentially problematic. Okay, so for what we covered for today, you should have the general idea of what is in a regression, but more importantly, you have some sense of how to read regression tables. So regression tables are going to show up again and again and again in your upper division coursework as you read research articles. And it's really important that you understand how to interpret them. It's a great skill to have in your pocket because not everyone knows how to read those tables.